Outfielders straight away on Weimer. Straight up stance. Feet close together. Stance a bit open in the box. Wearing number 21. Here's the pitch. Swing and a line drive into center field. It's another hit for Joey Weimer. Bebas makes the turn at second. He'll hold as Marsh charges in to pick it up. Joey Weimer on base for 10 consecutive at-bats to begin his Nationals career.
How about that? Charlie Slows on the call last night. 10 consecutive at-bats for Joey Weimer. He's an outfielder for the Nats that's been designated for lower leagues three times, over the last 7 months, and was picked up off a waiver claim in January. He tied the major league record last night with 10 consecutive at-bats to start the season, reaching, at the very least, first base. He grounded out on his next at-bat, trying to set the major league record. Carlos Delgado holds that. Good morning, everybody. It's only 4 games. They've got another 158 left in the baseball season, but Nats outfielder Joey Weimer is your current National League MVP. He's hitting 800 and has an on-base percentage of 846, down a little bit from the 1,000 percentages yesterday. The Nats, by the way, beat the Phillies 13-2, and they are 3-1 to open up the season. Mark Zuckerman, who covers the Nats and has for years, will join us at 11 to tell us what the hell's going on with the team that was predicted to be the very worst or second worst team in the bigs. This from Reed to start the show. Reed, so predictable, dude. Whatever you do, Kevin, please don't spend even a minute on the uniforms or branding or name or any of the topics that only people like you care about. It's gotten to be a total turn the station moment in my car, and I would imagine in many others as well. Oh, you guys are so predictable, the handful of you, because you think you're actually in a large group. You're in the way, way tiny minority of people that pay attention to this team. I'm not even sure you're a fan of the team, Reed. And maybe if you are, you're a new fan of the team. But it's so predictable that a handful of you people will reach out in a moment like we had yesterday. Josh Harris out at the Phoenix NFL owner meetings, and we're going to play a lot of that sound for you, including what he said about the name coming up here in just a moment. Not the name, excuse me, the uniforms. The uniforms. Yesterday really wasn't a name conversation. He did say something about the name, and it will please you to no end, Reed, what he said about the name. But whenever something like this happens, I always, check my social media to see who's lecturing me about what I should and shouldn't talk about on my show. Who's producing my show for me today? Ian does it a lot. Guys like Reed do it a lot. You guys couldn't be more detached from reality on this issue. It's amazing how you guys never learn how far off you are on this issue. I wish you could talk to some of the people that I've talked to over the years out there, but all you need to do is just check out the team's social media and see what tweets actually get millions of views. They're the ones that have to do with the name, the uniforms, the branding. The tweet last week about new uniforms coming on April 15th right now has 2.7 million views. Nothing else in the last 2 weeks has more than 40,000 views. You guys are embarrassing yourself when you do this. You're just so far off. It's okay. I imagine you're not really fans of the team, or if you are, you haven't been kind of a longtime fan of the team, and you haven't felt what it's like to be a fan of the team with the old name and with the old branding, and that's fine. I have no problem with your thought that this is a silly issue. You're entitled to that opinion. But when you start to tell me that Don't start talking about it. You're going to lose all your audience. You have no idea what you're talking about. It's the worst advice I get from people like you. The absolute worst. If I did a show that was nothing about the branding, I wouldn't lose one listener. I'd gain. I just don't personally enjoy doing it as much as I used to do. It's gotten a bit tedious even for me because I know Redskins isn't coming back. That's not going to happen. But, I mean, every single metric that you could look at, and those that you're not able to look at, you'll just have to take my word for it, just tells you how off you are. And look, it's okay for you to feel the way you feel, Reed, and the way you feel, Ian, and others. I don't care. If you think this is a silly issue, if you think this is a waste of time, turn the station when we talk about it. I'm okay with that. You're entitled to it. But don't tell others how they should feel. Don't lecture me and others about how we should feel idiotic for talking about this subject. It's not even one of those things that's analytical. It's measurable in terms of, when people are talking about it or when they are active on social media about it, it generates the most views and the most activity of anything the team does. I mean, I think when they, and I'm forgetting all of the different moments. I just pulled up before the show after I read Reed's tweet. I pulled up the numbers of views that they got for that tweet last week and just started, quickly going through the last 3 weeks. I went all the way back. An Oway video, was by far and away the most viewed tweet other than the new uniforms are coming, which went out last week. There was a video shortly after Adafe Oway signed in free agency. I don't know, it was a minute-long video highlight reel, and it has like 600,000 plus views, not 2.7 million, but about 600,000, and nothing was close to that over the last, since the season ended. So, yeah, you're just so far off on this, and it's okay because you don't know, more likely than not. I'm guessing you don't know, Reed. I can't imagine you're a longtime fan of at least, say, 40 years old and would think this way. Because if you do, you've really grown detached from the way the significant majority of the longtime fan base feels about these things. The team knows it. They've known it forever. It's just a big challenge for them. I give them a lot of credit for at least doing what they're doing right now. Sure, I'd love Redskins back. Sure, I'd be really happy if that's not a possibility, and it isn't, if they changed it to Washington Football Team, Washington Football Club, and we just call them the Skins or the Burgundy and Gold or whatever the team nickname would be. I think that would be the least polarizing and the most effective. They obviously don't think that is the way to go, and their data probably tells them nothing will work except Redskins, so why don't we just stick with Commanders? I think that's essentially where they've gotten. Everything else would become so polarizing, and it doesn't matter what they would pick. Red Hawks, Red Birds, whatever they are. I can't even remember all the different possibilities because I hated them all, to be honest with you. But their data, and they've got much more than I do, just says it's just easier to stick with Commanders and hope and pray that the team gets really good for a long period of time. And we can recapture a lot of the fans that left and grow a new fan base with younger fans. But Reed, seriously, dude, you have no idea how bad your advice is. Your advice is so horrendously awful. And every key metric that's available to you should tell you that. Now, I do want to play. Of course, we're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about exactly what Josh Harris said, because the beat reporters who were out in Arizona asked him about it, as they should have, because they know this is a big deal to many people. And Josh, by the way, remember, the owner, has not spoken since the season ended. So we got some good stuff from him on, the season. He even commented on Dan Quinn and Adam Peters. We also heard from Quinn and Peters, lots from Peters that we're going to play for you. But I do want you to hear what Harris said. Now, Max, are you going to play me the soundbite that he talks about just the heritage and why they're changing the uniforms, right? That's the first one you're going to play.
So the first one I have is on the changes to the W logo. I'm trying to find the
play that
we
for
have.
me.
Yeah, pulling it right now from the file. There we go.
As you're looking at the changes to the uniforms, has there been any discussion about the block W or any sort of updates to like kind of logoing with the team?
Yeah, we're always looking at this stuff, and like I said, we're committed to the Commander's name. I'm going to leave. We have a lot of surprises up our sleeve this season. I think people will be. I'm excited to see the reaction. I think we've got it right, and I'm going to leave it to the surprise situation.
Yeah. So he had said before that, he had talked about how that was the moment. Believe it or not, I had not heard that. Was that Mitch Tischler asking that question?
It was.
Yeah. I had not heard that. The sound that I had heard and read about was pretty much just about him saying that there are some surprises coming. He didn't want to reveal everything about the new uniforms, but it's really mostly about, tying it back to the past and honoring the heritage and honoring the past when it comes to these new uniforms. And that's, important to him. And he said, but there will be some surprises. And I know that a lot of you, because I saw it on social media, said, is the surprise going to be that the logo's back? I don't think that that's going to be the surprise. I think that there will be something related to maybe the helmet that's a little bit different with the W, but I don't know that for sure. What I do know is that championship era uniform, the alt uniforms that we saw last year against Seattle, Denver, and Dallas, that something very close to that is going to be the predominant uniform. It's going to be the uniform in 2026. Of course, we did not see a dark uniform, a burgundy topped uniform last year because they wore the whites the 3 times they wore them. Why? Because Joe Gibbs's championship teams wore white at home, and they wore those for 3 home games. So we will see what ultimately they look like on the 15th and what the helmet is, and maybe the surprise does have something to do with the helmet. It's possible. I think there's going to be a spear included in something. I don't know if that's the helmet or not, but we'll find out on the 15th when they unveil the new uniforms for 2026 and hopefully beyond. And I think while he did say, once again, and emphasize they are committed to the Commanders, and this is something we've talked about for a while, they're committed to it because there's just not an easy solution. I have said this a million times. As much as I want the Redskins back, as much as I would pay for, Washington football team if the Redskins weren't possible, with the old logo back on the helmets, etc. I just think that it's a super difficult situation for them. $6.05 billion for a team, and they inherited something that had great potential and very much an untapped fan base, and a fan base that had left that they hoped to get back, in a major way. But they had this albatross around their neck, the team name and what Jason Wright and his people left them with in terms of just, amateur hour with the name and the branding and the uniforms, etc., and how poorly it was received and how much it chased even more away from this team. No matter what 2024 brought back, it's still net negative from where we were 10 years ago. Majorly net negative from where we were 10 years ago and before that. But it's not easy for them. I get it, man. And they have all the data. They've got the marketing, the branding, all of the data on what certain names would do. And they've come to the conclusion that if they changed it to anything other than Redskins, it wouldn't work. it would be too polarizing, and they'd be in the same exact position they'd be in with Commanders. I wish they could go back to Redskins, people. I know that there are, many of you out there screaming, just don't take no. Tell the league and its sponsors to go shove it up their backside. This would be the best thing for the franchise. Of course it would be. We all know that, but it would not be something that the league or its top 10 corporate sponsors would allow. And because that horse already left the barn, it ain't going back in. It's not. I hope I'm wrong. God, I hope there's a day in which it comes back and I can say I was wrong all those years. But I don't think I am as it relates to that name. Now, he had other things to say, Josh Harris did, and we'll get to some of those things. We'll also get to some of what Adam Peters said. He said a lot, and there's some good, quotes from Harris and Adam Peters on Jaden Daniels playing in that flag football game that many of you said, it's not a big deal. I think it was a bigger deal for them, but ultimately they let it happen. But you'll hear some of that. You'll hear about what Josh Harris said about last season and about Adam Peters and Dan Quinn in particular. Lots to get to on this Tuesday, March 31st, last day of March. Spring is here, and I don't think it's going back. I think the cold weather that we had over the weekend, which was kind of brutal with the wind, I think we are finally done with this, and we can kiss 2025, 2026 winter goodbye. Feels good out there. April is coming. Lots to get to on the show today, including what Sean McVay said about Devontae Adams. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com.
Yeah, it's the priority is honoring our past and then looking to the future, right? Updating, but not forgetting about our heritage, who we are, and honoring that. And so we have a bunch of things up our sleeve. I don't want to ruin the surprise, but we're going to continue to, go back and try to embrace our past, but then update it. And so stay tuned.
Why was that important to undergo that part? Why, to embrace all that? Why was that important?
Well, because I lived through our past. I'm only 61, so I didn't go back before the 70s, but I was there for the 70s, 80s, and early 90s, right? And so I lived through how amazing those teams were, and what an impact it had on me. And I know that thousands of our fans, or millions maybe, feel the same way. And so I think it's important to go back to that as much as you can, but at the same time, we have a bright future ahead. So if you even the shape of the stadium and the look of the stadium, right? When you look at it, it looks like RFK. It doesn't, but it's been modernized, right? And so that's a great example. And so our uniforms are similar. I mean, some of the Super Bowl era uniforms, some, there's many ways to honor our past, and you're seeing how we treat athletes and bring back some of our past superstars. So all those things go into it.
I thought that was interesting how you said thousands. I mean millions, because it is in the millions. People that care about this stuff. Challenging for them. Always has been from the jump. I get it, and I don't even have all the data. It's a challenge because it's such a big issue, but there's just no easy answer. The easy answer isn't available to them, period. All right, let's get into some of what Josh Harris and Adam Peters said about the football team. So, I think yesterday was kind of interesting because Josh did not speak when the season ended, and he did after 2024. Obviously, an easier conversation with everybody on the beat and anybody else that had a chance to sit down with him at league meetings, or when he was actually a part of a press conference in Ashburn, if I recall, after 2024. He passed on the opportunity this year, and that's fine. Most owners don't necessarily have. I think somebody did something on this on social media not that long ago because Josh Harris didn't speak, and they basically said, like 52% of the owners don't talk when their seasons are over. I know Steve Bisciotti didn't talk for like 7 years until he, moved on from John Harbaugh this particular offseason. So it's not like there's a requirement to do it. But, there is a challenge here with trying to build a fan base back to a number that makes the $6 billion plus worth it. Now, the $6 billion plus worth it has already happened. Once the Lakers sold for $10 billion and the next franchises, whatever they sell for, it's going to look like a great deal. I mean, it's just the way it happens, especially in the NFL. The value of these things keep going up, and starting to accept, private equity money and potentially foreign money down the road. That was always a great buy at $6 billion, even though it was the largest ever paid for a North American franchise in that moment. But because the NFL wasn't accepting outside of the country money or private equity in terms of ownership, once they opened that door up, then it was going to be worth, a lot more than $6 billion. So those guys did very well. They will do very well. Josh Harris made a really good purchase, even though he was the only one, in the moment that was willing to pay $6 billion. Remember, we had some of the, Fertitta, right? Tillman Fertitta, the Rockets owner, back down from the number. We'll never know if Bezos was legitimately interested or whether or not it was just a situation where Dan was never going to sell it to Bezos. Who knows? But they'll do very fine. I mean, the value of their franchise is greater today than what it was when they purchased it. But in terms of their profit and loss, their everyday cash, generation and revenue generation, they got a long way to go to reach where they thought they could get per their business plan with their 20 plus limited partners that they pitched on this thing. And it's been tough for them. And so he's got to probably be out there a little bit more than maybe some of the other owners that are in better situations. I don't know. I don't know if it's a good thing for him to be out there or a bad thing to be out there. He's not the greatest of interviews necessarily. He's far from the worst. But anyway, on the football, because it's the first time we've heard from him, he was asked about his thoughts on the 2025 5-12 season. Here's what he said.
There is. Look, no one was happy with last season, and we wanted to make a lot of progress, and so we obviously made some changes, and then I think Adam and Dan had a great free agency. We picked up a lot of great players. I think, as you all know, we now next up is the draft, and so pretty much every waking hour we're trying to improve our team. And we want to go back. We had an amazing first year, a tougher second year, but we have we have a young quarterback that we have a lot of faith in. And, time's a wasting and we got to get on it. And that's what we're doing. Yeah, but Dan and Adam have our have my confidence, have our confidence. We're solidly behind them. And we made the changes we thought were appropriate under their leadership. And one of the great things was that the minute, like I said, no one was happy with last season, but we immediately got on it, right? And they got on it. And, sometimes there were some injuries, there were some other things that happened, but none of that's an excuse. And so we knew we had a lot of work to do. And that's what, and watching them, get back at it quickly. Dan ran an incredible process for the coordinators, met with tons of people. I was very much up to date, and obviously we ended up with two guys that I think are a little younger, but really have massively high ceilings, and I think can hopefully have a big impact on our franchise. And so and then Adam took over, got right into free agency, and you saw the activity. Obviously it took a little time for us to get started, but that's sometimes the way things are, right? And he made a lot of important moves to get the team younger, and to get the team faster, and to go back to hopefully players that can deliver a more aggressive playing style.
That was Josh Harris. There was a lot in there. First of all, just at the very end when he said it took us a little while to get going, like I think he was talking about like at the beginning of free agency. I hope he wasn't sitting there like a lot of the fans were 10 minutes into free agency screaming, "What's going on? Why haven't we done anything?" But look, I mean, I'm sure he knew the plan was to go after Alec Pierce, and they didn't get him. To go after Trey Hendrickson, they didn't get him. So yeah, Jalen Phillips. Who am I forgetting? Linderbaum. To go after Linderbaum, they didn't get him. So it did take a couple of hours before we got things rolling on day one. But you also heard him, do what most owners do. Certainly, after the period of time in which they could have done something about it. And he was never going to do anything about Adam Peters or Dan Quinn after this season. That would have been Snyder-esque. I mean, had somebody gotten fired after this past season, considering the context of it, that would have been, oh my God, we have a problem with the owner again. But he talked about, he and they have confidence in Dan and Adam. And they made the changes they needed to make, which, of course, relates to the coordinators, which, maybe the defensive coordinator should have been changed a year ago. But, coming off a season in which you're 12-5 and win 2 road playoff games, there's a lot of euphoria around almost everybody, even those that didn't necessarily distinguish themselves from a performance standpoint. So he was asked, and we don't have the sound about this, or sound of this, excuse me. But he was asked about Jaden Daniels playing in the flag football game in the Fanatics, flag football event. Michael Rubin, Tom Brady, whatever they got paid a bunch of money. And he said that I'm not going to say that I wasn't nervous. Glad he got through that one. But Jaden is somebody I trust. I left that up to him. So, it does sound like from him that maybe they okayed it, reluctantly. And I'm not sure. I would guess it seems pretty intuitive and obvious to me that the money must have been pretty significant. This was Saudi backed to begin with. Michael Rubin from Fanatics in charge of the whole thing, pulling Brady in to kind of recruit all of these guys. And I'm sure part of the pitch was, the Sonny Vaccaro pitch to Mrs. Jordan in the movie Air. We're making it all about your son, and you're getting our entire budget. I'm not saying Jaden got the lion's share, because he didn't. Joe Burrow got paid, and some of these other guys got paid really well. But would it shock me if Jaden was right at the top of the list in terms of what they got paid? Probably not. He should have asked, as Mrs. Jordan did, remember, in that movie, famously, very intelligent, very bright, very savvy. She got Sonny Vaccaro to go back to Phil Knight and give Michael a piece of the revenue with his shoe. That is one of the all-time great deals. First player ever to actually have revenue sharing with the team without it being part of the collective bargaining agreement. That movie was awesome. It's such a great story. I mean, I don't know if David Fawkes exactly as horrible as they portrayed him in that movie. I've spent some time with David before. He's not that bad. He's not. The bite isn't that mean spirited. But yeah, I would say that when it came to this flag football game, it was like, do you really want me to turn down this amount of money? And somebody like Josh Harris and even Adam Peters and Dan Quinn said, we get it. Just be really careful. And they did not, I'm sure, love when he was lining up at wide receiver. All right, Adam Peters had a lot to talk about. We'll get to what he said next. All right, we're kind of playing some of the best sound bites from yesterday's NFL league meetings and our top team brass being out there. The owner, the general manager, and the head coach. I think at the end of the show yesterday, we had some of what Quinn said, and we've got a little bit more from Quinn. But, the general manager obviously has just gone through a very, busy period of free agency, and now he's gearing up for a draft in which he's got the number 7 pick overall. He was asked by Channel 9's John Doran, right, Max?
Yeah, John Doran.
John Doran from Channel 9, WUSA, Channel 9. He was asked by John about just Jaden Daniels and the fit with David Blau as the new offensive coordinator. Here's what he said.
I want to throw a quarterback with you for a minute. Jaden, I'm sure you saw him play some flag football.
Try not to watch.
You didn't? Okay, I was going to say, were you on the edge of your seat there?
No, yeah. No.
What are you excited to see in his development this year?
Really excited with his, I think he's going to thrive in this new offense. Not that he didn't in the previous offense, but I think he'll really thrive in this offense and really open up a lot of different things and give him a lot more opportunities where he doesn't have to put the team on his back. And I think that's something that's going to be really cool to see and just his skill set and his game really develop. And so he's been working hard throughout the offseason, and he's in really good shape, obviously, and he's still healthy after the flag football, so that's good. And so I'm excited for him to come back and really start leading this offense again.
Yeah, so that there was nothing necessarily in there about David Blau and the fit with the offense. I know he talked about that a little bit as well. That was more about the flag football, and he's in good shape and he's healthy. Yeah, they were, again, beating a dead horse here. They were, on pins and needles with this flag football thing, as they should have, especially when he went out and lined up at wide receiver. All right, here's some more Adam Peters. This was him on the unpredictability of free agency.
Free agency is very unpredictable, and so you think you can have the best situation, the right people, the right coaches, the right scheme for somebody, and then they still don't come to you for whatever reason that is. And sometimes it's a great reason, sometimes you don't think it's as good of a reason, but you can't count on that. So you really kind of just go down the line and just always keep your options open. I think there was a point there where we made a couple signings and, okay, let's just sit back and reassess and see where we're at and let some things come to us. And that's what happened this year. And we were able to get some guys that I didn't think we were going to be able to get, and really happy that we got them.
I wonder who he didn't think he would be able to get among the free agents that they signed. Going through the list here, I would think that Owe was, look, we've talked about this before, that Owe was probably after Jalen Phillips, maybe, and perhaps even Trey Hendrickson. Who did they get sort of after the first wave? I don't know, Conquo? Chason? I like their free agency class. I like what they did. They filled a lot of holes. I don't know if they've got a superstar. I think Owe's got to play. When you get what he got, $68 million guaranteed over 4 years, basically $100 million, $25 million a year. Although I did see the updated number on the actual contract. I think it's 4 years, $96 million, according to Spot Track. So that's for 96 would be $24 million a year. And $68 million guaranteed. That has to equal major impact. It does. A major impact can be, we could get to the end of the season and talk about pressure rates and all of that stuff, but it better equal 10 plus sacks. The sack total needs to be in double digits for it to seem like it made sense. And by the way, with him, 2 to 3 forced fumbles during the course of the season as well. All right. This was Adam Peters on how much the free agency moves he made impacts the draft.
When you get into the draft, understanding how fluid the draft is, how much does what you've done in free agency impact what you do, especially early on?
Yeah, I think one of the things we wanted to do was make it so we don't have to force a pick, right? We don't have to pick for need. We don't have to pick a certain position. So we're in that position now. So it's really just, especially with that pick number 7's a big pick. And so just finding someone who can really impact our team, impact our team right away and impact our team long term. So whoever that is, and there's a lot of good players in there, but with what we did in free agency, it's not like, okay, we have to go get this because we have a gaping hole here or there. And you guys can debate on, where we need to add and all that, and I understand that. But for where we sit, we don't feel like we need to reach for anything right now.
That's a good position to be in. I don't know why you'd ever reach at number 7. I mean, I don't know how many times I can say this, but Bobby Beathard's the greatest general manager in the history of this city. And I can't tell you how many times he told me on this show, the biggest trouble you get in is when you draft for need. Biggest mistakes he's ever made, drafting for need. Charlie Casserly, same thing. Biggest mistakes you make is when you draft for need. So I'm glad they're in a position where they don't have to draft for need, but I'd love to know that they would never, at number 7 overall, draft for need. You're trying to draft a player that's going to become a perennial all-pro / Pro Bowl kind of player when you pick in the top 10. Doesn't always work out. Usually doesn't, actually. Even in the, this draft isn't 2/3 misses on, the entire draft, which it is just the entire draft, but you miss a lot in the top 10 too. But number 7, you're looking for a blue chip A+ player for years to come. You got it. That's what you're swinging for at 7. You're not going in there saying Jeremiah Love's the best back in this draft, best back in many years. If you have that feeling, best player on the board for us by miles. But we like our running back room. We're going to take Mansour Delane. We got a bigger need at corner. You're not doing that. You shouldn't do that. I'm not telling you that. I'm telling you that that's what Bobby Beathard and Charlie Casserly would tell Adam Peters. Any idea, Adam, who will be there at number 7?
Is it harder to get a feel for what teams like doing this draft compared to other years? Do you have a different, at this point in the time, do you have a sense, or is it harder than previous years?
Yeah, that's a great question because I feel that way. Like I have no idea who's going to be there at 7 right now. I mean, there's a couple guys that I know are going to be gone, but then how that goes after that, I don't know. And it changes every week. I think if you look at a mock draft this week, next week, the next week, it's kind of changed. So it'll probably get a little more clear as we get closer to the draft. And obviously, we're still right in the middle of our draft meeting. So the more work you can put in, we still have a lot of touch points with the guys. We have 30 visits coming in. So kind of getting an understanding of the landscape and who these guys are even a little bit more. But it's a mystery to me right now. And so we just got to be ready for anybody.
I wonder which mock drafts they pay attention to. Wouldn't it be nice to know which ones they pay attention to so we could just focus in on those? Because Casserly's told me before they got a lot of information from some of the mock drafts. Certain guys like Kuiper way back in the day, they paid attention to it because they had information on where teams were going. And it wasn't information that the team necessarily had. He said, other than a few players, I would say other than Fernando Mendoza, right now, everybody else has been moving around with every single mock you see. Like I just saw Matt Miller, ESPN's latest 7-round mock draft. Yeah, he went for the entire draft. And he's got Washington selecting Mansour Delane, the corner from LSU, at number 7, with David Bailey still on the board, Reuben Bain still on the board, and Sonny Styles still on the board. This will be a fascinating night on April 23rd. Fascinating night, because there is no doubt that what he just said, I believe 100%, that they just don't have a good feel for how the board is going to, move before them and who's actually going to be there. It's possible. They're going to draft their board, right? So the goal would be to get number 1 on your board. And number 1 on your board might be David Bailey, might be Jeremiah Love. What you don't want is you don't want them to be in a position where they end up getting number 4, number 5 on their board because their top 4 were selected. And I think that's what they don't know. That's the mystery for them, is they're going to have their board, they're going to have it ranked out, and they're going to go into that thing and they're going to, as a player gets picked, it's going to get crossed off their board, and they just hope that it's below where they pick. Delane, first time I've seen him mocked there, I think. Maybe the second time. A lot of talk about Delane, the corner, after his pro day last week. A lot of talk about him. This was him talking about, does the lack of clarity make it more difficult, given that he doesn't know how this, draft is going to sort of play out before they get to 7, to move the pick, to trade the pick? Here's what he said.
Because of that, does that make it harder to maybe have teams move around in that first round?
Yeah, I honestly don't. Without having a ton of quarterbacks, I don't know there's going to be a lot of moving around or moving back. I wouldn't anticipate it. You don't really see that happening unless it's for a quarterback, because it's pretty costly to do that if you want to move up. But so yeah, I haven't heard much about that in terms of teams moving around.
That makes sense, I think. The moves typically are made to get into position to select a quarterback. This right now looks like, best case, a 2 first-round quarterback draft, with Ty Simpson being the second quarterback selected after Mendoza gets picked at number 1 overall. I have seen some mocks with Carson Beck sneaking into the late first round. I've also seen some mocks, including Matt Miller's, that doesn't have Ty Simpson coming off the board until night 2 at number 33 overall after the first round. So, the anticipation for all of us on trading back, or the idea that that would be the best overall scenario, it's probably not likely in this draft. I think we've known that all along, but to hear him say it, and to say it in the way he did, I think he's kind of telling John there, who asked the question, John Keim, yeah, we're probably not going to have an opportunity to trade back. There's just not going to be a player, a quarterback specifically, that someone would want to bounce up for. Now, is it possible that a Jeremiah Love or, another player, a David Bailey, if he actually fell to 7, somebody might be interested? Let me just tell you, if David Bailey falls to 7, I'm going to be concerned as to why he's fallen to 7. There's nothing about his tape or anything with respect to Indy or anything else that would say, yeah, Bailey did this poorly, so he's probably going to drop. Guy had 14.5 sacks last year. He was literally unstoppable. He's got the quickest first step of any of these pass rushers and just has a relentless high motor. So if he's not there, if he's there at 7, I'd wonder why. I'd still take him, though. Still take him. We've got one more from him that I wanted to play, and that is, he was asked about, the idea of drafting at number 7 non-premium positions, running back, linebacker, those are mentioned. Safety is sometimes mentioned. Here's what he said.
There's been a lot of conversation about some of the guys at the top of this draft are at non-premium positions, including like running back. And part of the conversation is like with the economics of it, like draft that player, that like it's just not as the price later on, especially, is not as high as some other ones. Therefore, maybe it's not making a good value play from a salary cap perspective. Does that matter to you at all? Or
Yeah.
just the tone?
You consider it, yeah, but I really consider more how much they can impact us, and talking with our coaches, talking with the staff and the other scouts, like, okay, how much can this player impact us? And whether you're saying it's a running back, whether it's a safety, whether it's a linebacker that are non-premium positions, but at the same time, like I had Fred Warner in San Francisco, and I can't tell you how much that guy impacted our team. And so, like, there are exceptions to that, and so I think you're kind of, you can overthink it by doing that sometimes. But just I would like to say, take the best player who can help us now and in the future, and worry about the second contract later.
Yeah, man, I love that answer. I think, you get into a lot of the NFL draft geeks and analytics geeks. And sure, if it's close, running back and wide receiver, you want the rookie contract to be on the wide receiver because you're getting the most benefit from that position because it's going to get paid so big time if it works out when they get to the second deal, whereas a running back's second deal is not a massive cap, strain. Same typically with linebacker, same sometimes with safety. That's why we've heard, over the years, you can't take a linebacker in the first half of the first round. You can't take a running back in the first round. You can't take a safety in the top 10. But remember what the Lions did in 2023. They took Jahmyr Gibbs at 12, running back. It's worked out. And they took Jack Campbell, linebacker, at 18. It's worked out. So you want more than anything else, you got to draft a player that you're confident is going to become a great player. And if that player ends up being a running back or a safety or a linebacker, even if it's at number 7, yeah, give me the great player and let's worry about the contractual stuff later because we were not going to get that great player later on. Somebody else was going to take him too. I think that's the part where there is a lot of, strategy and there's a lot of gut instinct on not everybody's got a board that looks like everybody else's. You'll see these consensus boards put together before a draft so that the evaluation post-draft isn't about whether or not the team got the right player. It's about whether or not they got the right player in the right spot. Was he overdrafted or was he underdrafted? And you can underdraft or overdraft by miles, and that doesn't look great. But ultimately, if you got a great player, you'll take that along with the criticism and maybe not the necessary, or not the eventual cap benefit and contractual benefit that you might get. Look, with our track record of first rounders here recently, they need to get a really good player. They need to draft a player that they feel like is going to be a star. At number 7, you got to get somebody who's going to be a star. You have to, that's what you want. The contract stuff, the benefit of rookie deals, etc. To me, that comes second. All right, we're going to shift gears here. Mark Zuckerman's going to jump on with us. The Nats have started the season 3-1 with a player that had an absolute historic start when it came to his first 10 plate appearances. That's next.
And now the runner at first goes, pitch outside, runner stops, runner from third breaks to the plate. He will score. Beboss still on the rundown. They throw it back to Harper, chasing him, and Harper tags him on the back. The inning is over, but the Nationals execute the play to score the run, and Beboss ends up being out 2-4-3 to retire the side. The Nationals get 2 runs in the inning.
The Nats beat the Phillies last night 13-2. Let me just mention that, yes, there are 158 games left in the year. They've only played 4. They're 3-1. But currently, they're second in the National League in batting average, second in, actually tied for first in total home runs, second in RBIs, and first in hits. They've unloaded on people here in 3 of the first 4 games. 13-2 was the final last night, with Joey Wiemer tying the major league record for reaching base on his first 10 plate appearances of the season. Joining us to help us with what the hell's going on here in a 4-game sample size, I understand very small, is Mark Zuckerman, who covers the Nats for himself now. Substack, totally worth it. You should subscribe. It's literally just a few bucks a month, and you get Mark doing a phenomenal job covering this baseball team. Get a link to natsjournal.com at Mark Zuckerman on X. So, obviously, it's just 4 games. We know that. But tell me what's happened in these 4 to where they look like they're a capable offensive baseball team.
Yeah, and they're doing it against 2 of, what in theory should be 2 of the top teams in the National League, the Cubs and the Phillies, which maybe adds a little bit extra to this. It's not like they're doing this to the Marlins and the Rockies or anything like that. So they're just getting contributions from everybody. And I think that's maybe the most notable thing about what's happened so far is it's not about the star players. I mean, James Woods had a bad start to the season. CJ
Right.
Abrams hasn't done a whole lot. But they're getting it from up and down the lineup and their bench. It's a different lineup every day that they're trying out. There's a lot of matchup-based decisions being made. When you look at their batting order when it comes out each afternoon, you're saying to yourself, wait, this guy's batting where? He's hitting ahead of who? But there's a lot of strategy behind it. They're trying to find the best matchups. They're trying to use everybody they have on their roster. And last night, what stood out is they were just making contact. There was not a lot of loud contact, but they were racking up hits just by putting the bat on the ball and either hitting it where they ain't, to use the old phrase, or actually hitting it towards Phillies defenders who could not make the plays, and they just took full advantage of it. It's really been something to watch. Yes, it's 4 games, so who knows what this is actually a sign of or not. But so far, it's been a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, they had 17 hits last night. I think 14 of them were singles. So that's pretty amazing. And look, I mean, the story here of the first, 4 games of the entire season for everybody is Joey Wiemer, who tied Carlos Delgado with 10 straight plate appearances to start the season, reaching base on all 10 of them before he grounded out, I think, in the 5th inning. This is not a name I was very familiar with before the other day, and I have a feeling a lot of people feel the same way I do. So tell us about Joey Wiemer.
Yeah, not a name. Even a lot of us, for most of the spring, weren't even expecting to make the team, to be honest. He came up with the Brewers a few years ago and actually was kind of highly touted and had a decent rookie year. He's kind of an all-or-nothing guy. Can hit for power but strikes out a lot, plays a really good defense, runs the bases really well. But he's bounced around now, and over the last, I think it's 7 months, he's been designated for assignment 3 different times. So the Nats pick him up over the winter on a waiver claim, and he comes to spring training, and the thought is, well, maybe at best he's their 5th outfielder, but he's probably not even going to make the team. And then what happened is when they sent Dylan Cruz down, and then Robert Hassel as well, and they were short on outfielders, and he got off to a bad start this spring, but he was okay as it went on. And they said, we'd need another right-handed bat, especially in the outfield. The guy can play all 3 positions. We'll put him on the team. Opening day, they were facing a lefty, so that made sense to start him as a right-handed hitter against the lefty. And he ends up homering and reaching base 4 times. He sits game 2 because it wasn't the right matchup. He's back in there for game 3 against the lefty, does it again, reaching base 4 times and homers. And so last night, I think Blake Butera probably didn't think it made sense to play him against the righty, but he figured I can't sit him now given what he's done. So he hit him 9th.
He hit him 9th.
Yeah, 3,000 OPS. And he ends up getting on base 2 more times to tie the record. So it's a remarkable thing. Do I think it's going to last? No, I don't. But he is a guy who does have some talent, and if he can put it all together, could bring some value to the team. I don't think he's going to be an everyday outfielder for them. But I mean, what a start to the season for him.
I can't imagine that anybody batting 1,000 with an on base percentage of 1,000 has ever hit 9th before in any lineup at any time. So that may have been a first, but that may be harder for Elias to track down. Tell me about the starting pitching in the first 4 games.
It's been solid. It maybe not spectacular, but they've done what they've needed out of them. Last night, Foster Griffin, and here's probably another name a lot of people who haven't been paying attention don't know about. He pitched briefly in the major leagues a few years ago with the Royals and the Blue Jays. He ends up going to Japan and was really good there for 3 years. One of the best pitchers in Japan. Reinvented himself. The Nats saw that, and we've seen more of this across baseball in recent years. Guys can resurrect their careers over there. They get a chance to come back. They gave him $5 million, and he makes what was technically his first major league start last night at age 30. And he looked really good against, obviously, a very good Phillies lineup. He throws 7 different pitches. He used them all over the course of the game. He had to face Schwarber, Turner, and Harper 3 times, and he got Bryce out. He threw everything he had at Bryce and finally decided one more cutter on a 3-2 pitch in the 5th inning last night. Got him to ground out. He's a real thinking man's pitcher. Everybody has just been fascinated to see, does the success he had in Japan translate back here in the major leagues, or does it not? At least based on our first evidence, the first game, it definitely did. We'll see as teams start to get more of a book on him, how that goes. But that's another kind of one of those under-the-radar moves they made this winter. Not a big-name guy, but they think there's some potential there that what they saw in Japan could actually translate into some success here.
Talking to Mark Zuckerman. Again, I mean, it's just a nice way to start the season so that at least at the beginning of a season, people are like, whoa, I mean, they just beat the Phillies 13-2. They took 2 or 3 from the Cubs. Like, if they were to take one of these next 2 and open up the season with 2 series wins, look, I'm assuming that they're going to draw well for their first home series of the year. Not only because it's the first home series of the year, but they're facing the world champion LA Dodgers, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday this weekend. But things have gone so well through the first 4. What's bothered you? What's shown up in the first 4 that may have been a concern before the season and is a concern now? You mentioned James Wood. I mean, he had a decent night last night, but I think he opened up the season something like 0 for 8 to start or something like that.
Yeah, and a lot of strikeouts. It was been very similar to what we saw the second half of last year when he really cratered after an all-star first half. He's taking a lot of pitches in the zone and swinging at a lot of pitches out of the zone, and that's something he's going to have to correct. Obviously, he was better last night. He drew a walk, maybe a couple walks, a little bit better, although he also was up, I think, at one point with the bases loaded and just watched a fastball right down the heart of the plate for strike 3. So he's still figuring things out. Collectively, they're still not playing great defense. There was some ugliness in Chicago over the weekend. There was another botched play last night. The base running, the clip you played before we came on was a great example of the kind of thing they didn't do well in the past, where the old first and third double steal where you get them to throw down, the guy gets into a rundown and the trailing runner scores. They pulled that off really well, but overall the base running has also been sloppy. They've run into some outs. So there's plenty of room for improvement here. But on the flip side, you can say, if you're not playing clean baseball and your best player isn't hitting yet, and you've gone 3-1 and scored a lot of runs, maybe that's a good sign of things, because you would hope the other stuff worked itself out. And if you start playing a little better baseball and get James Wood and C.J. Abrams and some of the other big names to start producing, well, maybe they do have something going on here.
By the way, just any update on Dylan Cruz?
Yeah, he started at AAA. I haven't watched or paid attention to every single at bat, but I think he had a good opening night. Since then, a little less. They're going to give him time. I mean, this is not going to be a case of, oh, he's hitting 300 after a week or two, we're going to call him up. They need to see him have some real success down there, not just in the numbers, but just in the way he looks, the approach, everything else. And then if there comes a point that they say, okay, he's clearly shown he can excel at that level, then you bring him back up here. I think we tend to forget he never really dominated the minor leagues. They brought him up sort of because everybody thought, well, that's what you're supposed to do with the number 2 overall pick. It was, a month after James Wood debuted. But he needs to start having some success again somewhere. And I think they're willing to be patient with that and not force that issue. I mean, they're off to a 3-1 start, yes, but it's been clear that their approach to this season is not about short-term success. It's about building something for the long run. And so they want Dylan Cruz to be a part of that, but they're not going to bring him up here to do that until he's already shown that he can do it at AAA.
All right. Tell me, for those that don't know, the automated ball strike system, ABS, was introduced for this season. I've not asked you about this when you were on prior to the season beginning a few weeks ago. What is your opinion on it, and what's been the reception to it so far across Major League Baseball?
I think the reception has been fantastic. It's kind of similar to the pitch clock a few years ago where there were skeptics. And once they saw it in practice, said, oh, you know what, this is actually really good for the sport. I was in that same boat. I didn't necessarily like the idea of the robot ump, whatever you want to call it originally, but I got to see it a little bit in spring training last year and certainly got to see it this year. And what struck me was the two things about it. Number one, it's quick. It pops up on the scoreboard immediately. The whole thing takes 10 to 15 seconds. So it's not slowing down the game the way I thought it might. And then number two, because it's a challenge system, and you're only allowed 2 of them per game, if you get it right, you can do it again. But if you get it wrong, that's it. You're out of them. So you really have to pick your spots. You can't just call, every single time you think the ump got it wrong. You have to pick your spots when to do it. So I think it's been really well received. It's correcting the egregious mistakes, which is, I think, what everyone wanted. There have been some big moments in games where it has come up. There was a game in Cincinnati the other day where Eugenio Suarez did it on back-to-back pitches. I think the bases were loaded. He was right both times. The crowd was going bananas for it. They loved it. There's some drama to it all. I think it's a great addition to the game. I think they should leave it as it is. Don't add more of it. But it works quick. It corrects the biggest mistakes. And I think in the long run, it's going to help expose the worst of the worst umpires. The guys who people in the sport have known for a long time are not good at this. But if there's now tangible evidence of how wrong some of these guys are, hopefully Major League Baseball can now use that to make some decisions down the road and not keep retaining these guys for decades who are clearly not good enough or up to the job compared to the rest of their colleagues.
I've just seen it a couple of times, and to me, it's very analogous to tennis, where there's actually fan anticipation to see what it's going to produce once it's challenged. Now, just help me with this. You get 2 of these challenges a game, but if you get one, do you just get a third if you get both of them right? Or do you continue to have going. 2 until you get one wrong?
Yeah, you're allowed to get 2 wrong, I guess, per game, and then then you're done. So as long as you get it right, you can keep going. And and we've seen a few cases where teams have done it. But I think on average, in the minors last year, and I think in spring training, they said on average about 4 challenges total per game, and the overturn rate is right around 50-50. I think so far it's been better than 50%. Catchers are the best at it. Batters are a little worse than catchers. Pitchers are terrible at it, so most teams have told their pitchers don't do it. It's mostly just been catchers and hitters calling for it.
So I want to make sure I understand this. A hitter can call for it, or the manager, or the hitter has to tell the manager to challenge it?
No. Only the hitter or the catcher or the pitcher. They're the only ones allowed to do it. So they can't get any help from the dugout, and it has to be immediate. You can't wait because somebody might say, oh, hey, that was a ball or that was a strike. You have to see it in the moment and call for it right away. So again, that's why what you're seeing called, are the really egregious ones. They may not be the borderline calls because you're not 100% sure in that moment that it was a mistake.
And the pitchers are the worst at it. Interesting. Well, I mean, They've got the most invested in it, other than the
Exactly.
hitters. Yeah,
Exactly. It's an emotional decision for them, and their angle, they're 60 feet away from it, whereas the batter and the catcher are right there on top of the plate.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it.
All right, you got it, Kevin.
Mark Zuckerman, everybody, at Mark Zuckerman on X. And from there, you can link to his Substack, where he does a great job covering the Nats. He's also got a podcast with our good friend Al Galdi called Nats Chat. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts. All right, when we get back, we haven't played some of the Dan Quinn sound from out in Arizona. We'll do that. And we have found out more about the Tiger Woods arrest from last week. We'll get into some of that as well. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com.
Adding
Dan Quinn talked yesterday along with Adam Peters and Josh Harris. We've played a lot of that for you so far. But Dan Quinn said some things that, we did not talk about at the end of the show yesterday when we had some of the sound from him. But I wanted to play some of it because I thought it was interesting. Like, we keep wondering about, players that got injured last year. They remember they re-signed Dietrich Wise. We don't know about Dorrance Armstrong. There are players on the roster that may or may not be significant to them where we'd have no idea and wouldn't even guess. And I think some of those players will emerge over the next few months, OTAs, certainly when we get to training camp, preseason games, as, I didn't know that they liked him. He did have an update on Dorrance Armstrong, who, remember, got hurt in that Dallas game, game 7 of the year. He was having the best year of anybody on defense. Here's what he said.
I really thought he was really, coming into his own. And so for him to have that setback was significant. The good news with him, he's doing great. And so it sent me a video of him just training the other day and just super pumped about where he's headed and why it's going. Because he's a real factor in his versatility. You've seen him line up outside, inside. And so because of him, we're allowed to move other parts around as well. And so Charles is a player like that, where he can be outside all the way to inside. And so it leaves guys like Dafe and KC more outside first. So the best teams that I've been a part of had waves of players that could apply pressure. And we'll need to be able to do that, and we will.
Amenahue is the Charles he was referring to, if you didn't know. Yeah, I mean, the priority for them into this offseason was the defense has to be better. Turnovers is his, major theme and has been since he got here, and they haven't been able to do it. So he consistently talks about how that's disappointing, but they really feel and entered this offseason like they had to add, a ton of versatile pass rushers. They've got to be able to get after the quarterback in many different ways. Oweh's going to give him that. Interesting to hear him mention Amenahue, and certainly the return of Dorrance Armstrong will be big. We played a soundbite for you yesterday where he told, I forget who it was, the guy from ESPN, what was his name? Kevin Clark? Yeah, said that he thinks Johnny Newton will be the breakthrough player in the upcoming season. I kind of feel like he's mentioned a lot of players on that question, but he did mention Newton. But, I can see Chenal, Luvu, McGee with his speed, Amenahue, Newton, Armstrong, Oweh, obviously, all being a part of the pass rush. And then we're not even thinking about interior-wise Payne and Kinlaw and what they can be on pass downs. So we know they've got the talent to be pass rushers from the inside. But, God, they've got to get better in that area. And really, it starts with they've got to be better against the run. They can't put themselves into 2nd and 3s and 3rd and 2s because it's harder to rush the passer in certain down distance situations. So, yeah. All right. Up next for Quinn was, where were we going to go? So this was him on the tight end room. They added Chigakonkwo, but listen to him go through his entire tight end room because I think there is an interesting mention here.
Let's probably first start with Chig and the addition of him to go. And so I love the speed, first and foremost, because some people have time speed and then demonstrated game speed. And I felt that with Chig. And so you see it on deep over routes and ones that, build up speed on a play action game. Ben's strength, I really feel like, is still him in the move, in the backfield, from the line of scrimmage, off the line, and he can really run and get to the edge. John obviously is one of the best inline guys we go. And Yankoff is somebody that we felt like has really worked hard in dual role. And so I'm looking forward to see what Yank can do because he's a guy that's there. And the other player that we haven't talked about, but all of us have high hopes for, is Cager. He's got uniqueness to him, man. And so if there's one player, he said, Dan, who are you really looking to see what's going to take place in the spring and in this training camp? I see this guy putting in an incredible amount of work right now. And I'm I'm interested to see where that goes with Cager. I think there's a real value there for third down, and it's one of Zach's superpowers. And so when that didn't take place, that's a harder person to replace. Knows when to sit down, when to go, and so Cager is also one that we don't talk about a lot outside the building, but I thought it's worthy of bringing him up.
I just wrote down the players that I've heard him talk about being players to kind of, keep an eye on. Like, if you're going to ask me about a player that I think has a chance to really make an impact and maybe hasn't, I've got Cager, Newton, McGee, and Quan Martin. I think he's mentioned all of those in the offseason. I may be missing one or two. Let's hope he's right about all of them. That would be great. Cager, I've talked about. Like, he was a guy that, you can't evaluate results in preseason, like team results, especially when they're not playing anybody that's going to make the team. But Cager last year looked like a tight end that could run and catch. He had soft hands. He was 6'5", 6'6". I thought it was interesting what he said about Sinnott there, because you heard him talk about in the backfield. That kind of goes with the Kyle Juszczyk comp that Adam Peters gave Sinnott, a couple of days after the 2024 draft. And in a David Blau system, while Detroit didn't necessarily have a fullback, certainly the Shanahan-style offense does. Could we see Sinnott really as like a true on-the-move H-back in the backfield, moving at the line of scrimmage? He does have some athleticism. Bates, we know what he is, but the adding of Chigakonkwo and the mention of Cager, we're going to see a lot of 12 and 13 personnel. We're going to see a lot of 2 tight ends, a lot of 3 tight ends on the field next year. That's a part of what the Blau system will probably emphasize, with the quarterback under center and some different zone, run schemes, which primarily will be, more zone than maybe we've seen under Kingsbury. But the idea that they're loading up at tight end, having signed Okonkwo, having Bates, having Sinnott, feeling good about Cager, and he even mentioned Yankoff. I mean, Yankoff's build is more of a wide receiver build, but what it does is it makes the emphasis on wide receiver maybe a little bit less. Because if you're going to have 2 and 3 tight ends out in a lot of formations, you may not necessarily, to keep teams in base defense versus more nickel, you may not have, the need for as many receivers. Look, I think they've got a need for a receiver. Don't get me wrong. You've got Terry right now that we know of. And after that, we're not sure what we have. I mean, it'd be nice if Burks ends up being another outside wide receiver. It'd be nice if either McCaffrey or Jalen Lane could fill that role of being a true slot. And Diame, we know what he can do. He can run, he can catch bubbles and make some plays. Jefferson plays a little bit bigger as an outside receiver. To me, Jefferson and Burks might have some similarities there. But the tight end situation means that potentially the need for receivers. I mean, is it possible we go into next year with the receiver room looking like it looks today? Terry, Burks, McCaffrey, Lane, Diame, Van Jefferson. Yeah, it's possible. It's also possible that we end up with the running back room looking exactly the way it looks. Rashad White, Jerome Ford, Krosky Merritt, McNichols, and the ads are defensive ads in the draft. I'm excited about Chigakonkwo. I think he could become a legit upper-tier pass-catching tight end. All right. This was Quinn on David Blau's sort of adjustment and how the offseason's gone with him and, whether or not he's ready for that leap from kind of quarterback coach, assistant quarterback coach before that to OC and being the lead play caller.
He is ready, and all of us needed that shot at one time. For somebody to have the belief in us to go. And my belief in him has always been that strong. I had a great sense when we got him here. He was just done playing. I said, it took a little bit of a leap of faith to come here for him. He had some other chances too, to say, we're going to develop you, as a coach. And what would that look like? And calling some plays to practice. And so he did some of that in 2 minutes today. And so it wasn't just with him, but with others as well. and his mind was ready to go into that space, knowing what we needed as a team at this time too. And so he's attacked the offseason, the staff, collaboration, connection's been what I'd hoped it would be in a short time so far. They're almost all the way done from the teaching phase of getting all the material in. When you're like, think of like a professor teaching a class for a semester, you're like, what's everything I need to get all of this done? And when does it all go in? Because you want to put as much of the system in as you can during the spring. So when we come to training camp, we can throw the most competitive camp we've had in our 3 years together. And so the better you train them in that space, the less teaching of it that you're doing in camp. Obviously, like, teaching's our job, but like, we can get the players a step ahead going into camp, then that'll be a big deal. And David and the staff on offense and Durante, they worked really hard at that so far.
There you go. Look, all along, this was going to be the next offensive coordinator. Just know that. This wasn't like very hard for them. The Durante Jones thing, that was a legitimate search, lots of interviews, and they landed on Durante Jones. David Blau's been the OC in waiting since literally probably within a few weeks after he arrived. This is what they all knew he was going to do. He was going to be one either here or somewhere else. But this was the guy in the building that allowed them to think about how they wanted their offense to be and do it differently. Look, they still, if he weren't in the building, could have felt that way and gone after Mike McDaniel or gone after somebody else that would implement an offense that they felt more comfortable with. But Blau is a guy that I promise you they are not concerned with at all. They want this style of offense. When they decided on this is actually irrelevant at this point. Some of you are saying, well, why didn't they determine this before last year? Well, because they had the success they had in 2024. It's not like Kingsbury's system or style or play calling hurt them, all right? They did very well with it. They just decided after year one, sometime during year two, that they'd like to see Jaden in a different style of offense. And maybe year one with Jaden to make the transition from what he was doing in college into the NFL a lot easier. Kingsbury was like the perfect fit for his first 2 seasons in the NFL. But eventually they, decided maybe earlier, maybe later, they wanted to go to this, and Blau was that guy all along. I don't know if they knew it the day they hired him, but they knew it pretty quickly. That's the one that, I'm not saying me or any of you should feel the same way. We need to see it with our own eyes, but they're the ones that know him. They're the ones that are with him every day. They're the ones that have seen his relationships with the players, another big part of that job. They don't have any lack of confidence in his ability to implement this offense and then call it on game day starting in early September. One more from Dan Quinn. Asked about Jaden playing more under center this year. Here's what he said.
I think it's footwork. And so that's where it can start, because the drops could be different. When you're in the gun, like a 5-step would be a 3. And so how do you transfer those ones in? The speed of getting out, the speed of getting your play fakes to going. So that's what he's been working really hard on as well. So Jaden's an accurate thrower. He's got a big arm. And so now doing some of that setup, hitch, throw, quick 5. And so the footwork timing is the biggest, I would say, adjustment for it. And then from a non-physical standpoint, when you huddle a little more, cadences and checks and things that you'd use at the line of scrimmage. So those would be 2 points of emphasis prior to him getting here with the guys.
There you go. Footwork will be important because it is a little bit different in your drops, but cannot wait to see. They got to get a running game going, and I think that they can. And once that happens, they should be pretty dynamic with him at quarterback in some of the things that you typically get off of being able to run the football with a quarterback under center, play action, bootleg, etc. It'll be fun to watch. Fingers crossed he stays healthy. And thank goodness, because their fingers were crossed all of last weekend, not this previous weekend, with him playing wide receiver in a flag football game. When we come back, San Francisco was holding their, owner, head coach, general manager roundtables out in Phoenix. And of course, many questions about Brandon Aiyuk. We'll tell you what was said yesterday and what an NFL pundit believes San Francisco is doing with Brandon Aiyuk when we get back. I do want to mention that if you have any HVAC system needs, Foley Mechanical is the place to go. We had some issues about 9 months ago, reached out to Foley Mechanical. They took care of it. Now, Dan Foley is the owner of Foley Mechanical. He came out and dealt with my wife and I directly. Super impressive. He owns 100% of the company. It's not some franchise. You're not dealing with, a company owned by some private equity firm. He controls the quality from the equipment to the people he hires. His team, they are really, really sharp, professional, skilled in so many ways. Foley Mechanical is full service. They're heating, air conditioning, hot water, and boilers. And they're the go-to for older homes with radiator heat, which is a real specialty. Foley Mechanical works across the DMV, DC, Maryland, and Virginia, and they proudly install Amana HVAC equipment. If your system needs help like ours did, or you just want it done right, call Foley Mechanical or go to FoleyMechanical.com and tell Dan that I sent you. So yesterday out at the league meetings, the 49ers brass, Kyle Shanahan, John Lynch, and the owner, Jed York, asked a ton of questions about the Brandon Aiyuk situation. And Kyle basically, look, you can tell, and you could tell this when the season ended, they're not very happy with Brandon Aiyuk. They feel like they were taken to the cleaners on this. I mean, we've talked about this many times, but the fact that they were able to pull back close to $30 million of owed money to Brandon Aiyuk and void that amount in his deal, and Aiyuk didn't even fight it, tells you that, this was probably more on Aiyuk than it was on the 49ers. Kyle said, with respect to when is something going to happen with Brandon Aiyuk, he said, I don't have a date for it, but I know eventually it'll resolve itself. Hopefully we could get something for him. And I know we're in no rush to do that. You've got to do what's right for the Niners, and you're not going to try to hook up any other team as fast as you possibly can. Hopefully we can get something for that, and it'll take care of itself. Jed York, the owner, when asked about Aiyuk, said, I think anything's possible. We want to make sure that we have as talented of a roster as possible. First and foremost, he needs to get healthy and be able to perform. I think once that happens, he's a really, really good football player. I'll tell you the two different answers sort of, reflect Jed York's, ability to set up a potential negotiation or a potential trade option as like, let's not kill the player in public and then try to trade him. And I think that's what Kyle's doing. Kyle's frustration, and even John Lynch's frustration, has boiled over to the point where they don't want to do anything to help him. They don't feel like they owe him anything. And they certainly don't want to help another team sign him for a 1-year prove-it deal after picking him up off waivers and having him for an entire offseason. So they're going to wait this thing out. We had Mike Giannetti, remember, from Spot Track on the show 2 weeks ago, week and a half ago, and Mike said, look, I think this is headed towards a literal post-June 1 release, meaning June 2nd, he's going to get released. Nobody's going to trade for his contract and pay him $27 million next year. No one's going to do that. I think the 49ers know that. But Mike said because they know that, they're being very vindictive, but they have good reason to be vindictive. So they could designate post-June 1 right now, but it doesn't look like they're going to do that. Chris Sims, Pro Football Talk, NBC, and others, I guess, he had a bit of a rant on the Aiyuk situation. Here's what he said.
Kyle Shanahan said today that the 49ers are hoping to get something for receiver Brandon Aiyuk. Look, this is what happens when you have forfeited your guarantees.
Mm-hmm.
There's no reason for the 49ers to cut him.
No.
They can sit and they can wait. There's no trigger. That's why we talk about having that thing in there that forces an early decision. There was nothing to force a decision. They're not on the hook for anything.
Totally.
Everything is non-guaranteed. They can wait for someone to call up until week 1. As of week 1, when he's on the roster, and he won't be, but if he's on the active roster week 1, that's when they would owe him his full salary guaranteed as a practical matter, and we'll get to that point. They're just waiting, and they feel no compulsion to work with this guy
they shouldn't.
because they look at what he's done, and right, wrong, or otherwise, they view him as being the culprit in the collapse of the relationship.
He screwed them over multiple times. There's really not any other way to say it. He's done that. And then because of that, there's certainly not going to be any rush. This isn't one of your stories of like, oh, he's been great to us as an organization. He's been awesome. We're going to try to make it work with him and make the player happy. No, this is going to be one where they go, we actually don't care about the player at all, and we're going to do totally his best. And I could see this being one where they're waiting in training camp. Some team that's in the playoff conversation, one injury, and they go, uh-oh. Or they just look at their roster in general and go, we don't have a guy. Hey, 49ers, here's a 3rd or a 4th rounder for Brandon Aiyuk. I mean, we know they don't want him. That's going to hurt his value. It's a big price tag. He's coming off a knee injury. So all that's going to hurt. But, yeah, this is a case where the 49ers can wait as long as they possibly can before they unload him.
Even if all he gets a 7th rounder, it's more than what you have now.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
Time is on their side, and they're willing to see how it plays out.
That was Mike Florio with Chris Sims. Look, maybe they're right. 3rd, 4th rounder. That seems insane. 7th rounder. Again, like I'm always surprised that, guys like this who understand how it works aren't saying the problem with a trade is you trade for that contract. And who's going to pay him $27 million? Unless, they give him permission to seek a trade and the trade is contingent upon him tearing up his current contract and restructuring to something that looks like a 1-year prove-it deal. But if he gets traded, what incentive does he have to do that? He's going to get paid $27 million next year. I just don't see anybody trading any draft compensation on any day of the draft to bring on a guy that clearly has some issues and then pay him $27 million in base salary next year. I don't see that happening. The part where Chris Sims says he screwed them over multiple times, there's really no other way to say it. He's done that, and because of that, they're certainly not going to be in any rush. This isn't one of your situations where, he's been so good to us and been a valuable member of the franchise. Awesome. We're going to do right by him. No, the franchise, look, there are situations in which even if the franchise doesn't owe the player, that level of sort of respect on the way out, it makes sense to give the player that so that you don't set this precedent of other players talking about how you handled that player upon his exit. But with a Brandon Aiyuk, it doesn't sound like, given what they're doing, that players are sitting there in that organization saying, man, you shouldn't do this to him. He's been great. He's been awesome. It sounds like they're doing this because they know there's no pushback on that at all. And if it were my team with a player like this, and the situation was he was much more culpable for the situation than the team was, I wouldn't want my team to just make it easy for him and make it easy for another team. No. That's not petty and vindictive. That's just, good business. You're not going to come in here and demand a contract that we end up paying you. You get hurt, and all you got to do is show up twice a month for us to check how your knee's doing, and you go AWOL, and you were a little bit difficult to begin with during the contract negotiations. No, we're team first, franchise first. We're not setting a precedent of treating a bad guy well. So if that's the case, and we don't have all the details, but it's certainly over the course of now many months, would seem like even Dante Whitner, who does a 49ers podcast, former safety, in the NFL, and we had him on the show about 2 or 3 weeks ago. Even he said, you can't even think about doing something with him until you get a mental evaluation, and that he probably needs to seek mental therapy. He needs, a psychologist. He needs somebody to sit down with to get things right, because what he did has essentially never been done in the NFL, where you've walked away from that much money without even fighting for it, without even, going to the NFLPA and saying, help me, with this. They didn't step in and say, what are you doing? You can't do this. It sets a precedent for others. No, because a lot of times you'll see that the NFLPA will say, don't walk away from that. You can't, you can't walk away. Well, you have to fight for that. Nobody fought for it. Nobody fought for the $30 million in voids, which is a pretty strong indication that he didn't do what he was supposed to do. And he's the guy that is the issue here more than anybody else, which obviously is a red flag for any team signing him. And which is why you would think no team's going to give up draft compensation and take on his current contract. That seems completely insane with a guy that may not be stable mentally. Now, maybe it's change of venue. Maybe it's being with familiar people like his college quarterback and like his last GM. Not the GM in San Francisco, but the guy that's GM here. Maybe he's got a good relationship with Adam Peters. Maybe it would all turn around. There's another thought on this too about Aiyuk, because I think I have assumed for a while that once he's released, Washington is certainly going to be very interested and going to be at the top of his list, and maybe he'll be at the top of theirs. But if this guy is a major risk where you've got to do a 1-year prove-it deal, I think the pressure it would put on Jaden Daniels to deliver for him if he steps up on his behalf and says, I vouch for him. I don't know if that's the best situation for Jaden to be in coming off the injury plagued season of 2025, where he's going to feel like I've got to prove that I was right about my guy. And maybe Aiyuk's like, you got to feed me because I got to get paid next year. May not be the best overall situation for Jaden Daniels to have Aiyuk in the building, even though they may be super close. There's also a very good possibility. I don't know if it's good. There's a possibility that, while Jaden outwardly is like, that's my boy, that's my guy, love him. We were college, good friends, have remained good friends. But he might be, inside that building saying, no, he's crazy. He's not a fit for the locker room that you've created here at all. I love him. He'll always be a friend of mine, but I'm not vouching for him professionally. That's a possibility too. And maybe Adam Peters knows that this is, for all we know, Adam Peters is like, yeah, that's not going to happen. We're not bringing this guy into our building. The guy that drove 90 miles per hour outside of, the stadium before their season finale this year, early in the morning, and videotaped himself doing it. Some interesting information about Jawan Jennings. He is still an unrestricted free agent, has not been signed, missed the whole wave 1. We're in wave 2 right now. He hasn't been signed. So what happened with one of the top receivers on the free agency market? Why hasn't he landed somewhere? Some information about him came out yesterday. I'll share that with you when we come back. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. Before I get to my what do you got, let me just mention this. Greg Rosenthal, longtime NFL writer on the Brandon Aiyuk situation, said, quote, in a world where you don't think he acted professionally, keeping him held hostage on the roster when you're not going to get anything for him, I promise you they're not. And he said, I promise you they're not going to get anything for him. Makes you look small. It makes you look unprofessional. Be the bigger person. Even if you have certain feelings about how Aiyuk acted, why are you holding him hostage, essentially in the hopes of getting a 6th or a 7th pick slot, which I don't think you're going to get? Greg, the reason is that why give another team more time with Aiyuk? They're perfectly within the realm of, to me, professional if this was all on him. I completely disagree with that take. Thank you, Coach Z, for sending me that. So my what do you got is Tiger Woods. So there's data or more information about his arrest. Mark Schlabach writing this morning. He's covering the story for ESPN. Tiger Woods told authorities that he was looking down at his cell phone and changing the radio station in his SUV, which caused him not to see a truck slowing down before his rollover crash last week on Jupiter Island, Florida. Martin County Sheriff's Deputy Tatiana Levinar wrote in an arrest affidavit that Woods was, quote, sweating profusely and his movement was, quote, lethargic and slow while she interviewed him. For those that don't know, Woods was arrested last Friday on suspicion of misdemeanor DUI with property damage and refusal to submit to a lawful test. He did take a breathalyzer, which showed no signs of alcohol, but he refused to submit to a urinalysis test for other drugs. His SUV rolled over, clipped a trailer, which was being hauled by a truck. The truck had to slow down to turn onto a driveway, and Woods' SUV swerved and flipped down on its side. No one was hurt, including Woods. He climbed out of the passenger's window to get out. Another Martin County Sheriff's deputy observed, quote, several signs of impairment and requested that a DUI investigation take place to make sure he was able to operate the motor vehicle in a safe manner at the time of collision. It's going to be a really interesting situation with him because it's now the third of these situations. You know, the accident, obviously, in Los Angeles, him falling asleep on the side of the road. He was impaired. Now, he was not driving the vehicle at the time. I mean, is it possible that a judge will make Tiger an example here and send him to jail for a period of time? I guess it's possible. You know, Tiger apparently has said that he wants to drive because he values his privacy instead of having somebody drive him. I think at this point, he's going to have his license taken away anyway, at a bare minimum for a period of time, I would think. He's going to have to get a driver. This is now irresponsible. He's obviously impacted by something. To me, it makes sense that it would be painkillers, some sort of painkiller, some sort of, painkillers with anti-anxiety meds, all the meds that make you look the way he looked without consuming alcohol. I don't think we're going to find out that, it's cocaine or heroin or anything like that. I think it's going to be prescription meds, Schedule II narcotic prescription meds, but prescription meds. That is his issue. And he's had all of these injuries, going back to even pre-accident, now 5 back surgeries, I think, in total. And he's clearly got an issue with, I think, prescription meds. Can't be operating a vehicle the way he does. That's the part in which there's, a lesson that hasn't been learned so far by him. He's very fortunate that in all of these incidents, he hasn't hurt somebody else, because that's a possibility, a very good possibility that he could have hurt somebody else. And He'd be sitting in a jail right now had he hurt somebody else in these situations. He's had, my fault, he's now had, listen to this, 7 back surgeries and more than 20 operations, 20 on his right leg, which he severely injured in that car wreck back in 2021. 7 back surgeries and then another 20 operations on his right leg. There's a level of empathy for his situation, but not for his decision making relative to his situation. There's no way that can be justified. There's one other quick what do you got on a totally different sort of tone, and that is that Anthony Edwards, superstar player for the Minnesota Timberwolves last night, he scored 17 points, played just 23 minutes in the T-Wolves 124-94 win over the Dallas Mavericks. 23 minutes, that seems like not a lot. It wasn't a lot because while he was penciled into the starting lineup and announced as a starter before the game, when they went out for the opening tip, he was nowhere to be found. Mike Conley, backup, was in there for Anthony Edwards. Edwards finally made his way to the court late in the first quarter and checked into the game with 2 minutes and 1 second left in the first quarter. The coach, Chris Finch, asked to provide an explanation after the game as to where the hell Anthony Edwards was for the first 10 minutes of the first quarter. He just said, nature calls, close quote. So poor Anthony Edwards was stuck on a toilet in the locker room for what amounted to about 25 to 30 minutes of real time before he made his way out to the game, checked in, and as per usual, played very well. 17 points in 23 minutes. I'm surprised that doesn't happen more often. It seems like it just doesn't happen that much. Occasionally you'll see like a player, check out and immediately go into the locker room, but you always assume maybe there's an injury there. Sometimes it's not an injury. Meantime, another NBA story from last night. Victor Wembanyama had 41 and 16 in San Antonio's win over Chicago, 129-114. But he recorded the third fastest double-double in the last 29 seasons. He had 10 points and 10 rebounds in the first 8 minutes and 31 seconds of the first quarter. He had 10 and 10. This guy is sick. Now, he is still trailing SGA for MVP. SGA's down to like minus 275. Wembanyama's somewhere around plus 250. But he's closed some ground. Speaking of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander last night, in their overtime win over the Pistons, he went for 47. So on the night where Wembanyama went for 41, SGA one-upped him with 47 points in an overtime win over a, by the way, depleted Detroit team. They had multiple players out, including Cade Cunningham, who may be out for the rest of the regular season with a collapsed lung. But SGA's 47 came on 12 of 19 from the floor, just 2 of 3 from behind the arc, 21 of 25 from the free throw line. I mean, the way he draws free throws, it's really a bit of an issue, right now. Interestingly, he doesn't average the most free throw attempts in the NBA. That honor goes to Luka. Luka averages 10.1 free throw attempts a game. SGA's next at 9.4. By the way, Denny Avdija is third. Remember him? Third in the league in drawing fouls and getting to the free throw line. But last night, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's patented sort of forearm push-off to create space got called on him on a made 3 to win the game at the end of regulation. And so the game went to overtime. They still won it. He's really good. The NBA playoffs, guys, get ready for him. They're going to be outstanding. The NBA is fantastic. So shifting gears here for a moment. I saw this. Somebody sent this to me and asked me to answer it. It's from ML Football. You guys probably get a lot of these on social media. And it's a highlight reel of Darryl Green from his career. And what's written in the tweet is, quote, "Dad, how good was Darryl Green in his prime on the Redskins?" Close quote. This is not going to be a name conversation, although, as I mentioned to Max after the open to the show today, literally hundreds of notifications, all having to do with the brand and the name and the uniforms. Of course, it's a topic. But I feel like this is something that gets asked a lot of times on social media. But I have 3 boys, 2 of whom are massive sports fans. And I get asked about, Dad, how good was fill in the blank in his prime? Because they didn't get a chance to see the player play. So what I want to know from all of you at 301-230-0980, what's your favorite, Dad, how good was fill in the blank in his prime? What's your favorite one to answer? I have a definitive favorite one, but there are also several that I get asked all the time by my boys. Now, if you're not a father without kids, it's a friend that says, that doesn't know much about the teams that you root for. Tell me, please, how good fill in the blank was in his prime. 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. I want to know who it is that you love to tell people about. You got to see the guy in his prime, and you love to talk about how great that player was. 301-230-0980. Phone lines are open for that. By the way, my favorite part of spring, opening up the windows at night. I love doing that even sometimes during the winter, but during the spring, when you get to open up the windows at night and sleep with the fresh air swirling around the room. Not everybody can do it. Some of you have trouble just opening up your windows. Plus, they leak and they need to be repainted. My guys at Window Nation can help out during their More You Buy, the More You Save sale. You can save up to 50% off and get 0% interest for 5 years if you choose to finance the purchase. Invest in your home. Enjoy springtime. Visit windownation.com for a free in-home estimate right now, or call them at 866-90-NATION.
Hey folks, Jason Horowitz with an NCAA Final Four spotlight.
It's Cadeau accelerating down the right side of the lane. Back out to Lendeboard. Wide
Something on the new uniforms to finish up the show, coming up in about 30 minutes. I'll have that. But when you see something, and I get sent this stuff all the time, or I find this stuff all the time, or it pops up in my timeline where, like what I just mentioned, there's like video of Darryl Green, highlights of Darryl Green's career. Dad, tell me how good Darryl Green was in his prime. So my question to you is, what's the one that you love to get asked about and you love to talk about? Dad, or if you're not a dad, Harry, tell me what fill in the blank was during his prime. 301-230-0980. So for me, there's one that's so obvious because my boys will ask me about him, and they've asked me about him many times, and they still will occasionally ask me about Len Bias. Dad, how good was Len Bias? Not in his prime, because obviously he didn't get to a prime. But Dad, how good was Len Bias? And I love telling them how good Len Bias was. I love that particular conversation because I was there for all of it, witnessed all of it. Many of you did as well. He was a great, great college basketball player who I truly believe would have been an even better NBA player because you wouldn't have had zone defenses collapsing around him, doubling him. He was, first of all, every bit the killer in terms of his competitiveness on the court as Jordan was, as Bird was. He had that in him. He was an absolute killer competitor. Number two is, 44, 45-inch vertical at 6'8", chiseled body. And he was a quick jumper. Like it wasn't, he needed to come downhill off of, pushing off his left foot or both feet. He was a quick jumper. He'd grab an offensive rebound right back up, two-handed dunking over somebody's head. His head was level at times, if not slightly above the rim. That's how high he got up. The, deep alley-oop passes from Keith Gatlin to Bias, they'd come sometimes from half court. And it was just, they had this way where it would get set up. Gatlin would spin move. And once he spin moved, Bias knew to kind of jab step like he's coming out and then go back door. And the ball would be lobbed up to the corner of the backboard. And Bias would catch it with two hands and flush it, sometimes over, Jay Billis or somebody like that. People like to compare Bias and Jordan. Bias was a sophomore when Jordan finished up at North Carolina. They played against each other. Bias is a freshman, but Bias didn't blossom until his sophomore year, and it was late in his sophomore year. But they had a couple of battles, no doubt. But I've always said this, Jordan's not the comp for Bias. Dominique Wilkins was the comp for Bias. He was a sick athlete with an absolute pure, unstoppable, unblockable jump shot. He was an absolute killer shooter. He was a great shooter. Shot it at the top of his, extension. And then with his leaping ability, it was an unblockable shot, and it came off his fingertips so pure. Backward rotation, nothing but net. The guy inside 20 feet was deadly. He wasn't great at that point at putting the ball on the floor necessarily on the perimeter. That wasn't his best thing, but he wasn't terrible at it, and he could have improved at it. Like I've always said, he's more a forward. Jordan was a guard. Bias wasn't going to be a two guard in the NBA. He was going to be a small forward. Or playing with Bird, he'd sometimes play at a power forward slot. He wasn't the same type of player as Jordan was. He was a better shooter than Jordan was in college. He was a better dunker, believe it or not, than Jordan was in college, and Jordan was great. The two of them were just insane. But Bias is my favorite when I get asked, Dad, how good was fill in the blank? Tell me about him. Bias is my favorite to talk about. My other favorite, I'll just tell you because I get asked about this particular person by my boys all the time, because I think on social media, they'll see his highlight reels, pop up. Dad, how good was Lawrence Taylor? I get asked that. I love, even though he was on a rival team, I love talking about how great Lawrence Taylor was. Because for me, in my lifetime of watching professional football, he's not just the greatest defensive player of my lifetime watching football. He's the greatest player, offense or defense, in my lifetime of 1970s and on of watching NFL football. No player has ever been more unstoppable, more unblockable, more impactful, certainly at the non-quarterback position, than Lawrence Taylor was. And, I tell my boys, they literally had to change the way they played offense. Joe Gibbs had to add, help because you couldn't block him with a left tackle solo. You couldn't block him certainly with a running back or a tight end. And Gibbs implemented the first ever H-back. And Donnie Warren ended up becoming a big part of how they protected Joe Theismann from Lawrence Taylor, and they still couldn't do it very well. Those are my two favorites, Bias and LT. What about you guys? 301-230-0980. Max, you're too young to have an answer for this question.
But if I did get to say one, I would like to throw Sean Taylor in there just for the
Sure.
amount of time I got to watch him and when I watched him, because that was just a very special time for me.
And, like all of people who didn't get to see Sean Taylor will ask, how good was he? And it's like, look, the thing about Sean for me is that his first year or two were, a bit rough. He had a difficult relationship with Gibbs to start with. And then he was a player that missed on a lot of plays, a player who at times was undisciplined. But when we got to 2006, 2007, and 2007 in particular, his final season, I mean, you saw it. You saw the range. No safety that size had that kind of range. And in terms of the hitting and the speed, it was, I've said this many times about Sean Taylor, and some of you disagree with this. He hadn't put together a Hall of Fame career when he passed away. Obviously, it was too short. But he was trending towards becoming a player that played at a Hall of Fame level starting in 2007. That's what was so tragic. He was so great that year before he got injured. And of course, ended up in the wrong place at the wrong time. If he hadn't been injured, would have been with the team. CJ, Dad, how good was fill in the blank in his prime? What's your favorite guy to talk about when you're asked about that?
Well, I want to start by saying, and I want to put in my 2 cents, I think Sean Taylor was in the right place, like at the right time. Unfortunately, he was where he was supposed to have been. He was home with his family.
Yeah,
so that was
I
the right
understand
place
that.
to be.
The question is, would those right?
No,
Yeah,
I
hear what you're saying.
you.
Yeah.
But the two, okay, great. I'm a Sean Taylor fan, but the two that I think about, I'm a little bit older than you. Joe Montana, and then he was Lou Alcindor, but obviously later became Kareem. When he was at UCLA in that game when they played against Houston, the Houston Cougars, I mean, he was unstoppable. His freshman year, unstoppable. Even into the pros when he went to the Bucks, early years with the Lakers before Magic got there, he carried the team by himself. And of course, Joe Montana, going back to when he was at Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Great comeback guy. I mean, I agree. Tom Brady probably is the GOAT, but Joe Montana played with when defenses were allowed to hit quarterbacks. Brady wasn't. I do think, having Jerry Rice made the big difference, but 2 minutes down by 6 or down by 3, I'll take Joe Montana hands down.
He was
any
great
day.
in that.
And
situation, no doubt. The Kareem thing, by the way, the Lou Alcindor game against Houston, there were two of them. The game in the regular season is credited for being the game that it made college basketball popular. It was at the Astrodome, and Elvin Hayes had 39 points, and Houston upset number one ranked UCLA. But they got him back in the Final Four later that year, and then Lou Alcindor went nuts in that game. Thanks for that, CJ. Mike in Leesburg. Dad, how good was fill in the blank in his prime? Who's the guy that you love to tell people about?
Well, all your examples are way over the top. I was thinking more Redskins centric. So when you talk about Darryl Green, we got to watch him. He was the greatest of all time. But who would wear the newspaper on his arm walking into the park?
Yeah. You mean to act like he was reading the Wall Street Journal? Theismann's told that story about Dexter?
Finish the story.
Yeah.
What's the best player he ever did? It involved a Redskins. It involved a Cowboys quarterback, by the way.
Yeah.
Danny
Jerry
White got
Hogaboom.
smashed. No, Danny White.
Oh, well, Danny White, yeah. But tipped the ball that Darryl Grant picked off later in that game. Yes, knocked out Danny White earlier in the game. Yeah. So Dexter's the guy you love to tell your kids about how good he was. He was great. He was great.
I didn't realize this was all sports, so I was just thinking, good old Redskin.
Yeah,
Just
no,
Dexter
it could be
was
anything.
He was a man
not
child.
everybody's going to pick Redskins. Yeah. But Dexter's a good one. I mean, Dexter's an absolute good one. I mean, my boys who love sports, they've asked me about Dexter. They've asked me about Riggo. Dad, how great was Riggo in the day? And the thing about Riggins in particular that I love to talk about is that beyond, what he is as a person, incredibly smart, interesting, the whole thing. And then obviously just the all-time charismatic personality, I think maybe of any athlete that's ever played team sports in this town. But Riggins, the highlights show him as this battering kind of fullback type, when the truth is Riggo had sprinter speed at 6'2", 230. For many, many years, he held the record in Kansas for the fastest 100-yard dash number. Riggins outran people when he got, into the secondary as a big man. As he used to say, he had horsepower. He absolutely had it. Let's go to Brian in Tacoma Park. Brian, when you're asked, Dad, how good was fill in the blank? Who's the guy that you love to talk about? Brian, you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
I got you.
Hello? Okay.
Yep.
For starters, as a child, I played boys club hoops in Hyattsville, and our practices were in the early evening at Northwestern High School. And when our practice was over, the Northwestern varsity would come in for practice. So I was able to see how good Bias was in high school,
right,
in his rawest form when he was lifting weights in high school, which at that time was kind of unheard of. But my dad died 6 months ago, but I would continue to ask him how good was Elgin Baylor, because there's very little footage of him, and the only footage that even people our age would see of him were the recent ones where he was dealing with that Fakakta situation with the Clippers. He'd always be at the draft. He was dealing with Donald Sterling. And I feel like with players like Elgin Baylor, the context is so important, because no three-pointers, no equipment, no year-round training, low tops most of the time, if not Chuck Taylors. And it was nothing for him. It was an ordinary night for him to drop 50, 60.
Yeah, I mean, my father, too, has talked about Elgin Baylor throughout my life. About how great he was in high school at Spingarn. And, he also talks a lot about how great this player, George Leftwich, was at Carroll, who Coach Thompson used to say the same thing about, that George was his teammate, that George, is arguably after Elgin, the second or third greatest player to ever play in this area. He got in a car accident when he was at Villanova, and that sort of ended his career. But I can remember, my father and his friends and my uncle talking about Elgin Baylor and his greatness in high school in DC too. Yeah. Thanks, Brian, for that. Appreciate it. Let's go to Ross in Tampa. Ross, when you're asked, Dad, how good was fill in the blank in his prime? Who's the player you love to talk about?
What's going on, Kev? What's good in the hood?
What's good, Ross?
No, not much, man. Yeah. So you had mentioned Lawrence Taylor. So my dad, he is a big time Giants fan when they're good. He's a fair weather fan otherwise. And the first time I had ever seen Lawrence Taylor, he was in a WWF wrestling ring. I'm like, who is this guy? And who are all these big dudes surrounding the ring? And he was telling me that is the greatest football player of all time. Not the best wrestler, because all the version of Lawrence Taylor I know is just the guy with all the off-field intangibles and highlight reels. And then when I would and I got a buddy at my job who's a big-time Redskins fan too. You're a little younger than you. He always tells me the same things about my own favorite team and how good they used to be. But Lawrence Taylor, when I would actually watch the highlights, him and Sean Taylor, those are the two guys that I just don't think would have been as successful in this era of football because they were just way too violent.
Yeah. Yeah, well, LT too, like Sean, was a freak athletically. I mean, you couldn't, he had multiple moves and he was a monster physically, but it was really his speed more than anything else. I don't think we had ever seen a pass rusher off the edge as a linebacker with that kind of speed. He was an outside linebacker. Nobody called him an edge back then, but he could cover as much as he could, rush the passer. But that first step, it was over. And then LT had a motor, man. It just never stopped. He was that great. Thanks, Ross. Let's go to Morgan. Morgan, go ahead. Who's your guy when you're asked, hey, how good was fill in the blank in his prime?
Hey, Kevin. Love the show. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
This is a player who I don't follow their team at all. I wouldn't seek out watching the team, but if that team was playing, I would sit down and stare at the screen because every time Barry Sanders touched the ball, something magic was going to happen.
Right.
And I heard a story about him in college. Barry Switzer was getting his Oklahoma Sooners fired up to play the Oklahoma State Cowboys. And he said to his defense, Switzer says to his defense, which was Tony Casillas and a bunch of, grown men types, go ahead and do not knock Thurman Thomas out of the game. Don't let him go for 100, but don't injure him. And they looked up at him quizzically in the locker room and said, Coach, you've been telling us our whole careers, take these guys out of the game. What's going on here? He said, we don't want to deal with his backup.
Yeah.
And the backup to Thurman Thomas was Barry Sanders.
Yep. Yeah. It was, it's funny because I think I mentioned this maybe the other day and I forget if it was on the air or off the air, but in talking about like great running backs, I think the one that I get asked about more than any is like Bo Jackson, more than a Barry Sanders or more than anybody else. It's Bo. And the conversation that I love to have is what Herschel was as a college player, because Herschel, I think, is the greatest college football player I've ever watched. Now, he was not the greatest running back in the NFL, but as a college running back at Georgia, he may have been the most dominating college player of all time. And Bo was up there. But I get asked, that question about Bo Jackson a lot, even more so than Barry Sanders. But Barry's a good one, Morgan. Thanks for that. 301-230-0980. Dad, how good was fill in the blank in his prime? Daryl's on hold. Daryl, go ahead.
Hey, Kevin. Thanks for taking my call. Appreciate it.
Sure.
And by the way, thanks for keeping me in touch. I'm down here in Boca Raton, Florida, and thanks for the podcast and the show and the guests you have. It really helps me stay in touch with my favorite team up there. So thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening.
So I get asked a couple of them, and the first one that comes to mind is I was at UVA in the 79 through 83, the Ralph Sampson years.
That's a good
and
one.
So I get asked about that a lot because, in the pros, his knees and his back and all that. But in college, come on, 3-time National Player of the Year, and we'll never see that again.
Yeah.
With the one and dones and stuff. He was amazing. And then the other one is really controversial, and that is I get asked about O.J. Simpson.
Yeah.
And
He was
field,
incredible.
He was incredible. He was. So, and I was a little bit younger then. I guess I was maybe a teen when he was in his prime. But man, that dude was something else on the field and in the Hertz commercials.
Oh yeah, I mean O.J. Simpson was the first true kind of crossover black-white, star athlete. And he was a great football player at SC. I mean, I don't remember him at SC, but I barely remember him in Buffalo in the early 70s. And then I remember him more towards the mid 70s, and then when he ended with San Francisco. But the 2,000-yard season, first ever, remember, that was done in 14 games, not 16 games. He was incredible. He had unbelievable vision, speed, had some of what Barry Sanders had, but OJ as a back was incredible. But your first one, Daryl, Ralph Sampson, like there are three players like I love talking about, college basketball wise. David Thompson's number one for me because David Thompson was Michael Jordan before Michael Jordan. And you know who says that? Michael Jordan does, because Michael Jordan's favorite player growing up in Wilmington, North Carolina, was David Thompson at NC State. I think David Thompson is certainly up there among the greatest college basketball players of all time. There's some really good stuff on him, by the way, in that ABA special called Soul Power on Amazon. But the other one is Leitner. Leitner is one of the greatest college basketball players that ever played, and maybe the best clutch college basketball player of all time. And I couldn't stand him, but it's hard not to recognize how great he was. Like, he was a badass on the court. He could shoot it. He could post. He was mid-range. He was long-range. He was a rebounder. He was a defender. And every big shot that he had in his career, every big spot, they went to him and he delivered over and over again. Leitner's Sampson, David Thompson, among the greatest college players of all time. I know people would probably just point to Kareem or Lou Alcindor and say him or Walton, and they're certainly in that conversation as well. Thomas in Upper Marlboro. Thomas, who's your guy when someone says,
Kevin,
Dad?
how are you?
I'm good, Thomas. Dad, how good was who in his prime?
How good was who? I'm going to give you two names. Okay, one is John Carlos, and if you don't know who that is, I suggest your people go back and check.
Yeah.
Say that again?
68 Olympics.
Yes, sir. And if, you don't know, it's the impact of what he did as well as on the track as he did off. So I would recommend people go back if you want to know what I'm talking about, because it's impact your life even now. And then the other one is Josh Gibson. My father told me so many great things about him swinging a bat that would just blow these guys away right now. So those are my two, and I appreciate you listening to me because I know I got a little carried away with them.
No, those are good. Those are good ones. I mean, you know who loves to talk about Josh Gibson is Tommy. Tom really knows a lot about Josh Gibson's career, and many people think, obviously, had baseball been integrated for the entire time, Josh Gibson might be the greatest player who ever lived. Mike in Rockville, finish it up for us. Dad, how good was fill in the blank? Who's your favorite guy?
I was going to say David Thompson because we're contemporaries, and I got to see him a lot in college. I remember on the famous Super Sunday when the Redskins lost to the Dolphins. Thompson had the game where he beat Maryland at Cole with a tip-in at the end. It was insane. But the guy I'm going to pick is Frank Howard. And the reason why I say that is I saw him a ton as a kid. We were among the handful of people sitting down at DC Stadium watching the Senators. And I remember years later, I had season tickets, and I would take my kids to the Redskin games, and they'd say, what are those white seats up there? And I would tell them the stories about Frank Howard.
Right.
The other reason why I liked him was he lived in my neighborhood when I was a little kid. And he actually went to my church. And he was the guy who was, the Senators were so bad. He had no protection in the lineup, and yet he wasn't an MVP, he wasn't an all-star, but he was. I mean, of course, before he played baseball, he led the Big Ten in rebound at Ohio State. He was more than just a giant. But I mean, literally, if you had seats on the third base side, you'd be squirming in your seat when you came to bat. They didn't have nets back then to protect you. The other story.
I always tell my kids about how prolific Frank Howard was. I'm 6'2" now, although I'm old now, so I'm probably only 6'1". But I tell people when
he was what, 6'7", 6'8"?
He's 6'7", 270, probably weighed more than that. But I was telling somebody one time that when I was an altar boy, he was taller kneeling than I was standing.
Yeah.
And but he lived in our neighborhood. He was a great guy. And until they got Mike Epstein later and Ken McMullen, he played for a few years where he had zero protection in that lineup, and yet he put up big numbers. It's a shame he didn't play on a better team where more people went to the games. Final thing was, you're right. David Thompson he was Jordan before Jordan. He was, to get to see him in person was the other thing that's great about that for people if they want to go back and watch the old YouTube. What was fun to watch him was playing with a 5'5" point guard and a 7'4" center.
Yeah, Monty Tao and Tom Burleson, and with no dunk. The dunk had been outlawed in college basketball, so he would literally catch the ball with his head pretty much 3 feet above the rim and just drop it in. His vertical, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he had one of the all-time verticals. I think it was 48 inches.
42. No, he was measured officially at 42.
Oh, was that what it was? Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, that's a very prolific
He was
number.
6'3".
Yeah. By the way, Kevin, I'll tell you another thing that's interesting about Len Bias was I had a chance to see him also at Northwestern, and he was not a top 25 guy. He wasn't he was, his other two schools were NC State and Oregon State. And God is my witness. I was there for press day at 82 when Lefty was holding court when Bias was a freshman. Maryland fans, if you went to those first few practices, and this is the kind of hyperbole that people shouldn't engage in, but if you saw it, you believed it. They had a freshman named Ed Farmer from North Carolina.
Yeah,
who was outplaying. He had a lot of problems. He spent 2 years at what was basically a reform school in Philly before Lefty got him. Lefty would get kids wherever he could, but Farmer was slaughtering Bias at practice. And you're right. When he was a freshman sophomore, he tried to dribble the ball more than 5 or 6 times in a row. He struggled.
Yep.
He just worked so gosh darn.
You got to wrap it up. I got to get to a break, but just wrap it up because I love the story.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Bye.
All right. Sorry. But yeah, Bias. I mean, it's hard. It's actually hard to exaggerate how great he was, especially end of sophomore year, junior year, and senior year. All right. Something about the uniforms when we come back, and also Jawan Jennings update. See ya. Branding
is honoring our past and then looking to the future, right? Updating, but not forgetting about our heritage, who we are, and honoring that. And so we have a bunch of things up our sleeve. I don't want to ruin the surprise.
Yeah, that was Josh Harris yesterday out in Phoenix. Branding, uniform talk, name talk, per usual on this show, and I'm sure many other shows, but certainly we did it at the beginning of this show today. It results in, for me anyway, more social media responses than almost anything else I talk about. This from Jason. Kevin, do you actually think anybody believes that the name topic isn't a huge fan topic, or are they just baiting you into this? No, I actually think they believe it. I think there are plenty of people out there, not plenty, but people who typically aren't either from here or aren't the same kind of fan. And look, there's some people that have been here and are hardcore fans that it's not important to. I think I want to make this, I want to distinguish between those that don't like the conversation, don't care about the name, think it's silly to talk about the name. Have at it, no matter if you're a longtime fan or not. From the people that lecture you to say, stop talking about it because no one else but you cares about it. That's just silly at this point. And anybody that believes that, I don't think they're just baiting me into that conversation or baiting others into the conversation. I think they believe it. I just think they're ignorant. And I think they're very detached from the fan base. And like I said, there's plenty of stuff out there that just proves how silly that kind of belief is, like the recent tweet from the team last week, the uniforms are coming, and they had 2.7 million views of that tweet. And basically the average is like 30,000 views on anything else. I mean, I did find something with 600,000 views a couple of months ago or a month and a half ago when they signed Owe, or a month ago, whatever it was at this point. Not even a month ago, 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, whatever it was. And they put out a video, but nothing gets the response like name, branding, uniform talk for the team. They know this. Real quickly, on the uniforms, like I've been saying, it's going to be what we saw last year, something very similar to what we saw last year as the permanent. The surprise, or he doesn't want to ruin the surprise, he's talking about the helmets. I can't tell you specifically what the helmets are going to look like on April 15th. It's not going to be the old logo. I'm pretty sure of that. I think it'll be the W with maybe some spear action. You guys are more into the uniforms than I am, but it'll be something like that. So I think there will be something having to do with the helmets in particular that will be part of the surprise on April 15th. I don't think it's going to be the old logo as much as I'd love to see it, because there was nothing ever controversial about that. Jawan Jennings, real quickly, bottom line is he's just asking for too much money. People want him, but he's asking for way too much money. And the 49ers didn't want to pay it to him. And now he and his agent are finding out that the league agrees with the 49ers. Back tomorrow.